The Friday afternoon flight from Phoenix to Chicago was boarding smoothly. When Aaron noticed the man in the expensive suit acting strangely at the gate, he kept checking his phone, glancing nervously at other passengers, and repositioning himself to get a view of everyone boarding. Aaron dismissed it as typical business traveler impatience and focused on finding his own seat, 16C, settling in with his book. He had no idea that the nervous man's behavior was the first red flag in a situation that would escalate into a life-threatening crisis before the plane even reached cruising altitude. Flight attendant Jessica Walsh greeted passengers with her practiced smile as they filed past. 22 years of flying had given her an almost sixth sense about people, an ability to read tension and trouble before it fully manifested. When the man in the expensive suit, boarding pass showing seat 23A, passed her, something pinged in Jessica's awareness. His smile was too bright, too forced. His eyes were scanning the cabin too intently, and his hands, she noticed, were trembling slightly despite his attempt at casual confidence. Jessica made a mental note. Watch this one. The man's name was Derek Morrison, though the ID he'd used to book the ticket said Thomas Bradley. Derek settled into seat 23A, an aisle position near the back of the plane, and immediately began watching the boarding passengers with laser focus. He was looking for someone specific, someone he'd been following for 3 weeks. Someone who had a restraining order against him but didn't know he'd tracked her to this flight. Someone sitting 15 rows ahead in seat 8F, completely unaware that her nightmare was sitting behind her on the same plane. That someone was 26-year-old Amanda Foster, traveling to Chicago for her sister's wedding. Amanda had moved from Phoenix to Denver 6 months ago, specifically to escape Derek, her ex-boyfriend who'd become increasingly obsessive and threatening after she'd ended their relationship. The restraining order was in place. Derek had been arrested twice for violating it. But he'd made bail both times, and now he'd found her again. Amanda had no idea he was on this flight. She'd been so careful, hadn't posted about the trip on social media, had only told immediate family, but Derek had his ways. He'd hacked her email, seen the flight confirmation, and booked a seat on the same plane. He had a plan, and that plan involved getting close to Amanda during the flight, convincing her to talk to him, to understand that they were meant to be together. But wait, here's where it gets dangerous. Derek wasn't just obsessive, he was delusional and desperate. In his jacket pocket, he carried a small knife that had made it through security because it was ceramic, undetectable by metal detectors. In his mind, this flight represented his last chance to win Amanda back. If she refused him again, if she rejected him one more time, he decided that neither of them would leave this plane alive. A murder-suicide at 37,000 feet. He'd thought it through carefully. The plan was perfect, or so he believed. The plane finished boarding and pushed back from the gate. Captain Robert Chen completed pre-flight checks, while First Officer Michelle Santos reviewed the flight plan. Standard 3-hour flight, good weather, everything routine. In the cabin, passengers settled in, pulling out books and tablets, adjusting air vents, preparing for the journey. Amanda sat in 8F looking out the window, relaxed for the first time in months. She'd gotten away from Phoenix without incident. Derek didn't know where she was. She was safe. Or so she thought. Derek waited until after takeoff, until the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers started moving around the cabin. Then he unbuckled and stood, his heart pounding. This was it. He'd walk up to row 8, sit down next to Amanda, and they'd talk. She'd understand once he explained everything. She'd see how much he loved her, how far he'd come to be with her. It would be romantic. She'd forgive him. They'd start over. In Derek's fractured mind, this scenario made perfect sense. But Derek needed to get to that seat next to Amanda, and someone was sitting there, a middle-aged woman reading a novel in seat 8E. Derek approached row 8, putting on his most charming smile. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'm so sorry to bother you, but would you mind switching seats with me? I get terrible motion sickness in the back of the plane, and I really need to be closer to the front." The woman looked up, surprised. Amanda, in the window seat, hadn't looked over yet, hadn't noticed Derek standing there. If the woman agreed to switch, Derek would be sitting right next to Amanda before she even realized he was on the plane. But here's what Derek didn't know. Jessica Walsh had been watching him from the moment he stood up. Something about his body language, the way he'd been sitting tense and hypervigilant, the way he'd suddenly moved with purpose toward the front of the cabin, triggered every alarm bell in Jessica's trained awareness. She positioned herself in the aisle where she could observe row 8, and when she heard Derek ask to switch seats, when she saw the intense focus with which he was staring at the woman in the window seat, Jessica's instincts screamed danger. Jessica moved quickly up the aisle, arriving at row 8 just as the middle-aged woman was about to agree to switch. "Excuse me, sir," Jessica said with professional firmness. "I'm going to need you to return to your assigned seat. We don't allow seat changes once boarding is complete and the flight is in progress. FAA regulations." This wasn't entirely true. Seat changes were allowed in certain circumstances, but Jessica's gut was telling her to separate this man from whatever he wanted in row 8. Derek's face darkened. I just need to sit here, for medical reasons. Motion sickness. His voice had an edge now, desperation creeping in. Jessica held firm. I understand, sir, but I cannot allow the seat change. If you're experiencing medical distress, I can provide medication and a sick bag. Please return to seat 23A. Derek's hands clenched into fists. He looked past Jessica to Amanda, who'd finally noticed the commotion and turned to look. When Amanda saw Derek standing there, her face went white as paper. She gasped audibly. Derek, what are you doing here? Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with terror. Derek's face lit up with a disturbing smile. Amanda, I knew you'd be happy to see me. We need to talk. Just let me sit here and we can— No. Amanda's voice rose to a shout. Get away from me. You're not supposed to be near me. There's a restraining order. Other passengers were turning now, sensing drama. The woman in 8E looked confused and alarmed. Jessica's hand went to the call button, pressing it repeatedly to alert the cockpit and other crew members. Derek's expression shifted from delusional joy to anger in an instant. Amanda, don't do this. Don't make a scene. We just need to talk. I flew all this way for you. You can't just— Jessica stepped between Derek and Amanda, her body language shifting to protective and authoritative. Sir, I need you to step back immediately and return to your seat, or I will have to restrain you and notify law enforcement for landing. Derek's eyes, previously focused on Amanda, now shifted to Jessica with a frightening intensity. You don't understand. She's my girlfriend. We just had a fight. This is between us. Stay out of it. Jessica's voice remained calm but firm. The passenger has stated she has a restraining order against you. You are in violation of that order and creating a disturbance on this aircraft. Return to your seat now, or you will be restrained. You won't believe what Derek did next. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket. Jessica saw the movement and her blood ran cold. Was he reaching for a weapon? She immediately pressed the emergency button on her communication device, alerting the cockpit to a potential threat. At the same time, Marcus Chen, another flight attendant who'd been moving forward in response to Jessica's call signal, reached Derek from behind. Marcus was a former military police officer, trained in restraint techniques. He saw Derek reaching for something and didn't hesitate. Marcus grabbed Derek's arm, preventing him from withdrawing whatever was in his pocket. Derek struggled against Marcus's grip, his face contorting with rage. Let go of me. Amanda, tell him. Tell them we're together. Tell them. Amanda was crying now, pressed against the window, trying to put as much distance between herself and Derek as possible. I don't know him. I mean, I did, but we broke up. He's been stalking me. There's a restraining order. He's not allowed within 500 feet of me. Other passengers were standing now, some filming with phones, others backing away in fear, parents pulling children close. Marcus forced Derek's arm behind his back, professional and controlled despite Derek's resistance. Sir, stop resisting. You're making this worse. Another male passenger, a large man who'd been sitting nearby, stood to help. Need assistance? Together, Marcus and the passenger, whose name was Robert, moved Derek toward the rear galley. Derek still struggling and shouting. Amanda, please. I love you. We're supposed to be together. You can't do this to me. Jessica knelt beside Amanda, who was shaking and crying. You're safe. I won't let him near you. Can you tell me exactly what's going on? Amanda struggled to speak through her sobs. He's my ex-boyfriend. He became obsessed after I broke up with him. Threatened me, followed me, showed up at my work. I got a restraining order. I moved to a different state to get away from him. I don't know how he found out I was on this flight. Oh God, what was he going to do? Jessica held Amanda's hand. You're safe now. He can't hurt you. I need you to stay calm. We're handling this. In the cockpit, Captain Chen received the emergency alert. We have a passenger restrained for threatening behavior and violating a restraining order. Possible weapon on person, requesting priority landing and law enforcement meet. Air traffic control responded immediately. Flight 482, you're cleared for emergency descent and priority landing Chicago O'Hare. Law enforcement and security will meet aircraft. Descend to 15,000 feet. In the rear galley, Marcus and Robert had Derek pressed against the wall. Marcus pulled out the aircraft's restraint system, plastic flex cuffs designed for exactly this situation. I'm going to secure your hands, Marcus told Derek, his voice calm but leaving no room for argument. If you continue to resist, this will be more difficult for you. Derek was still struggling, still shouting for Amanda, but Marcus was trained and strong. Within a minute, Derek's hands were secured behind his back. Marcus carefully searched Derek's pockets. His hand closed around something hard in the jacket pocket. He pulled it out. A ceramic knife, 4 inches long, sharp and deadly. Marcus's jaw clenched. Did you bring this intending to hurt someone? Derek's face crumbled. The reality of the situation was finally penetrating his delusions. I just wanted to talk to her. I just needed her to listen. She won't answer my calls. She moved away. She's avoiding me. I love her. I would never hurt her. The knife is just, it's for protection. I wasn't going to use it." Marcus exchanged a look with Robert, who'd gone pale seeing the knife. "Sir, you brought a weapon onto an aircraft and approached a woman with a restraining order against you. That's multiple felonies. I'm turning this knife over to law enforcement when we land." Aaron, from his seat 12 rows away, had watched the entire incident unfold with shock and horror. The man he'd noticed acting strangely at the gate had been stalking another passenger, had brought a knife onto the plane, had planned to do God knows what. Aaron's hands were shaking as he pulled out his notebook, documenting everything he was witnessing. This was a story that needed to be told, about awareness, about intervention, about how quickly ordinary flights could turn dangerous. Jessica stayed with Amanda for the remainder of the flight, which Captain Chen had shortened by requesting the emergency descent and priority landing. Other flight attendants moved passengers away from the rear galley where Derek was being held, creating a buffer zone. The cabin, which had been relaxed and ordinary 30 minutes ago, was now tense and fearful. Parents held children. Business travelers put away laptops. Everyone was hyper-aware that violence had been moments away, prevented only by an alert flight attendant who'd noticed something off and acted on her instincts. Amanda told Jessica the full story between sobs. Derek had seemed normal when they first started dating. Charming, attentive, romantic. But after 6 months, he'd become possessive. Jealous of her friends, her coworkers, her family. Demanding to know where she was every moment. Checking her phone. Showing up unannounced. When Amanda tried to break up with him, he'd become threatening. "If I can't have you, no one will." Classic abuser language. The restraining order had been necessary after he'd broken into her apartment. "I moved to Denver thinking I'd escaped," Amanda said, wiping her eyes. "I was so careful I didn't tell anyone but family about this trip. I don't know how he found out." Jessica's expression was grim. "He probably hacked your email or phone. Stalkers can be very technologically sophisticated. But Amanda, he's going to jail now. He violated a restraining order, brought a weapon on a plane, threatened you. This is over. He can't hurt you anymore." Amanda wanted to believe that, but she'd been living in fear for so long that safety felt impossible to trust. The plane landed in Chicago with police cars and FBI agents surrounding the gate. The moment the aircraft door opened, law enforcement boarded. Derek, still restrained in the rear galley, was removed first, shoved into the jetway by federal agents while passengers watched. He was still calling for Amanda, still insisting he just wanted to talk, still utterly unable to comprehend the severity of what he'd done. Amanda was escorted off next, surrounded by protective officers, taken to a private room where she'd give her statement away from Derek's line of sight. But here's what made this case particularly significant. When FBI agents searched Derek's belongings, they found detailed plans. Notes about Amanda's schedule, photos taken from a distance showing her at work, at the grocery store, walking her dog, a journal filled with obsessive entries about their relationship and his conviction that they were soulmates destined to be together. And most chillingly, a letter he'd written to be found after his death, explaining that if Amanda wouldn't be with him, they'd be together in death. This was a murder-suicide plan, prevented only because Jessica Walsh had noticed something off and refused to let Derek sit next to his target. Jessica gave her statement to FBI agents, explaining what she'd observed and why she'd intervened. He was too focused, too intense. When someone asks to switch seats, there's usually a casual quality to it. But this man was desperate to get to that specific seat, next to that specific woman. His body language was wrong. And when the woman in the window reacted with obvious fear when she saw him, I knew I'd been right to keep them separated. The lead FBI agent nodded seriously. Your instincts likely saved that woman's life, and possibly other lives if he'd caused violence on the aircraft. This was excellent threat recognition and intervention. Aaron interviewed Jessica 2 days later for his article. How did you know? He asked. What exactly tipped you off? Jessica thought carefully before answering. It's hard to explain. You do this job long enough, you develop a sense for when something's not quite right. The way he was watching passengers board, the trembling hands despite the calm facade, the desperate quality to his voice when asking to switch seats. Any one thing could be nothing. But together they painted a picture of someone who was a threat. I trusted my gut, and thank God I did. Amanda recovered slowly from the trauma of the incident. The knowledge that Derek had been on the same plane, had been moments away from sitting next to her with a knife in his pocket, gave her nightmares for months. But therapy helped, and so did the certainty that Derek would be in prison for a long time. He was charged with stalking, violation of a restraining order, possession of a weapon on an aircraft, attempted assault, and making terroristic threats. His trial resulted in a 20-year sentence with no possibility of parole for 15 years. During Derek's trial, Amanda gave powerful victim impact testimony. Derek Morrison stole 2 years of my life. 2 years where I couldn't feel safe, couldn't relax, couldn't trust that he wasn't watching. I moved to a different state. I changed my phone number. I got a restraining order. And still he found me. Still he followed me. Still he planned to hurt me. But Jessica Walsh saw him. She recognized the danger. She stopped him. And now I can finally breathe. I can finally be free. Thank you, Jessica. You gave me my life back. Jessica attended the trial, sitting in the gallery as Amanda testified. Hearing the full extent of Derek's stalking, seeing the evidence of his obsessive planning, made Jessica realize just how close to tragedy that flight had come. If she'd dismissed her instincts, if she'd let Derek switch seats, if he'd been sitting next to Amanda for 3 hours with a knife in his pocket and a delusional plan in his mind, the outcomes didn't bear thinking about. But she had trusted her instincts. She had intervened, and everyone had gone home safe. The airline industry took notice of the incident. Jessica's awareness and intervention became a training case study for flight attendants worldwide. Threat recognition isn't just about terrorism or weapons. Training materials now emphasized. It's about recognizing predatory behavior, stalking, domestic violence situations. Flight attendants need to watch for passengers who are overly focused on other passengers, who make unusual seat change requests, who trigger discomfort in other passengers. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Marcus Chen, the flight attendant who'd physically restrained Derek, also received commendations for his quick response and professional handling of a dangerous situation. His military police background had prepared him perfectly for the moment when action was needed. Jessica identified the threat, Marcus told reporters. I just provided the backup when the subject became physically aggressive, but the real hero is Jessica. She saw what the rest of us missed and prevented a tragedy. Robert, the passenger who'd helped restrain Derek, never sought attention for his role. But Aaron tracked him down for an interview. I just did what anyone would do, Robert said, uncomfortable with being called a hero. A flight attendant needed help with a dangerous person. I'm a big guy. I could help, so I did. Aaron pointed out that many passengers had watched without helping, filming with phones instead of assisting. Robert shrugged. I guess I was raised to help when someone's in trouble. Didn't really think about it. The other passengers from that flight stayed connected through a Facebook group, processing the experience together. Many expressed guilt for not noticing Derek's suspicious behavior earlier. Others praised Jessica's awareness and Marcus's response. Some shared that the incident had made them more vigilant in their own lives, more aware of threatening behavior around them. One woman wrote, I used to ignore my gut feelings when something seemed off because I didn't want to seem paranoid or judgmental. After seeing what Jessica's instincts prevented on that flight, I trust my gut now. If something feels wrong, I pay attention. Amanda became an advocate for stalking victims, working with organizations to improve restraining order enforcement and support services. Restraining orders are pieces of paper, she'd tell audiences. They don't physically stop someone determined to violate them. We need better monitoring, better enforcement, better protection for victims. And we need people like Jessica Walsh, people who pay attention, who trust their instincts, who intervene when they see danger. That's what saves lives. 3 years after the incident, Amanda married a man she'd met in her support group for stalking victims. He understood what she'd been through because he'd lived through his own stalking nightmare. Their wedding was small and private, with Jessica Walsh as a guest of honor. Amanda had asked Jessica to read a poem during the ceremony, and Jessica chose Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, a poem about survival, resilience, and refusing to be defeated by those who try to destroy you. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as Jessica read, You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Derek Morrison, serving his sentence in federal prison, was required to attend counseling for his obsessive and abusive behavior. Reports from his counselor indicated limited progress. The subject continues to exhibit minimization of his actions and delusional thinking about the victim. He refers to her as his girlfriend and believes she will visit him once she calms down. Prognosis for rehabilitation is poor. Amanda, learning of this assessment, felt sadness more than anger. Derek's inability to recognize reality meant he'd destroyed his own life as thoroughly as he'd tried to destroy hers. But this is what gave Amanda the most satisfaction. At a victim advocacy conference 5 years after the incident, she met 3 other women who'd been stalked by Derek before her. He'd had a pattern, a history of obsessive relationships that ended in restraining orders and arrests. But Amanda's case, because it involved the airplane and the knife and the federal charges, had resulted in the longest sentence. Derek would be in his 60s before he was eligible for parole. His pattern of destroying women's lives was finally broken. We compared stories, Amanda told Aaron. Derek did the same things to all of us. The charm, then the possessiveness, then the threats, then the stalking. But I was the last one. His pattern stops with me. Jessica continued flying, but the incident had changed her approach to the job. She was more vigilant now, more trusting of her instincts, more willing to intervene when something seemed off. "I always cared about passenger safety," she told Aaron in a follow-up interview. "But before the Derek Morrison incident, I thought safety was mostly about emergency procedures and evacuation protocols. Now I understand that safety is also about watching for predators, for threats, for the violence people bring onto planes in their hearts. I'm not just serving beverages. I'm protecting people from each other sometimes." Aaron's article about the incident, titled "The Seat Swap That Didn't Happen: How One Flight Attendant's Instincts Prevented a Murder," went viral. It sparked conversations about stalking, about trusting instincts, about the often invisible work flight attendants do to keep passengers safe. Comments poured in from readers. Many shared their own stories of times they'd ignored their instincts and regretted it. Others described situations where trusting their gut had kept them safe. The overwhelming message: intuition matters, awareness matters, intervention matters. 10 years after the incident, Aaron organized a reunion of key people from that flight. Jessica, Marcus, Amanda, Robert, and several other passengers gathered in Chicago to reflect on that day and its aftermath. Amanda, now a successful advocate and author of a book about surviving stalking, looked around the group with tears in her eyes. "Every person in this room played a part in saving my life. Jessica saw the danger. Marcus stopped it. Robert helped. And all of you passengers who gave statements to FBI, who supported me afterward, who made me feel less alone. You're all part of why I'm here today, thriving instead of just surviving." Jessica responded with her own reflection. "Amanda, you saved yourself first. You got the restraining order. You moved states. You were trying to protect yourself. I just happened to be paying attention at the right moment. But I've thought a lot about the randomness of it all. What if I'd been looking the other way when Derek stood up? What if I'd been in the back galley instead of watching the cabin? What if I'd dismissed my instincts as paranoia? So many small things had to go right for you to be safe. That terrifies me and reassures me at the same time." Marcus added his perspective. "I think about all the Derek Morrisons out there who we don't catch. All the stalkers and abusers and people planning violence who slip through because no one's watching at the right moment. We got lucky that day." Well, not lucky. Jessica was skilled and aware. But how many victims aren't lucky? How many don't have a Jessica Walsh watching over them? That's what keeps me up at night. The conversation was heavy, sobering, full of awareness that not every story ends with intervention and rescue. But it was also full of gratitude. Gratitude that on this one flight, at this one moment, the right people were in the right place with the right skills and awareness. That's all we can ask for, Aaron realized. Not that every tragedy is prevented, but that when we have the chance to prevent one, we pay enough attention to see it and care enough to act. Jessica had done exactly that, and Amanda was alive because of it. 15 years after the incident, Jessica Walsh retired from flying. Her farewell flight was from Phoenix to Chicago, the same route as the Derek Morrison incident, done intentionally to honor Amanda and close the circle. Amanda flew on that final flight specifically to be there, bringing her husband and 2 children. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Amanda asked the captain if she could make an announcement. He agreed. Amanda stood in the aisle, holding the microphone, her voice steady and strong. "Most of you don't know this, but 15 years ago, on this exact route, your flight attendant Jessica Walsh saved my life. A man who'd been stalking me, who had a knife in his pocket and murder in his heart, was on my flight. He tried to sit next to me, and Jessica stopped him. She saw danger that no one else noticed. She trusted her instincts when it would have been easier to just let him switch seats and avoid confrontation. Because of her awareness and courage, I got to live, I got to recover, I got to find love and have children, and write a book and help other victims. All of that happened because Jessica Walsh paid attention." Amanda's voice broke. "Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for being exactly who you are." The cabin erupted in applause. Passengers stood, many in tears, honoring Jessica's service and the life she'd saved. Jessica, crying openly, made her way to Amanda and embraced her. 15 years of connection, of gratitude, of a bond formed in crisis and strengthened through time. "You gave my life meaning," Jessica whispered to Amanda. "You showed me that this job matters, that paying attention matters, that caring about passengers as people rather than seat numbers matters. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for thriving. Thank you for reminding me why I do this." After landing, after the passengers had deplaned, after the goodbyes and the ceremony celebrating Jessica's retirement, Amanda and Jessica sat together in the quiet aircraft. Just the two of them, in row 8, where it had all happened 15 years before. Do you ever think about what would have happened if, Amanda asked. Jessica nodded. Every day. But I've learned not to dwell on the what-ifs. We can't know alternate timelines. We only know what did happen. I noticed. I intervened. You survived. That's the story. That's enough. Amanda pulled a small wrapped box from her bag. I have something for you. A retirement gift. Jessica opened it. Inside was a beautiful compass engraved with words. Jessica Walsh. For always knowing which way is right. With eternal gratitude, Amanda. Jessica held the compass, crying again. I'll treasure this, thank you. Amanda hugged her fiercely. No, thank you. For everything. For seeing danger when others saw nothing. For acting when it would have been easier to do nothing. For giving me back my life. I can never repay that, but I can promise you I'll never forget it. Aaron's final article about Jessica and Amanda, published on Jessica's retirement, captured the essence of their story and its lasting impact. 15 years ago, a flight attendant noticed something off and trusted her instincts. That choice saved a woman's life and set in motion a cascade of changes in airline training, in stalking awareness, in the life of one woman who went from victim to advocate. Jessica Walsh never sought recognition. She simply did her job well, with awareness and care. But that was enough. That was everything. Because Amanda Foster got to live, got to thrive, got to become a voice for other victims. All because one flight attendant looked carefully at a seat swap request and recognized danger hiding behind forced friendliness. That's heroism. Not the dramatic, headline-grabbing kind, but the quiet, attentive, professional kind that saves lives every day when we're paying attention enough to see it. The story of Flight 482 became legend in aviation circles, taught to every new flight attendant as an example of why vigilance matters, why trusting instincts matters, why the job is about more than service with a smile. Jessica Walsh's name became synonymous with awareness and intervention, and Amanda Foster's survival became proof that ordinary people doing their jobs extraordinarily well can change the course of someone's life. One moment of recognition, one refusal to allow a seat swap, one intervention that prevented murder. That's the power we all have, if we're watching, if we're caring, if we're willing to act when something feels wrong. Jessica watched, she cared, she acted, and Amanda lived. That's justice, that's protection, that's love in its most practical, powerful form.